Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's DOT virtual live event, Navigating Risk, Regulations, and Driver Safety, Expert Insights on Drug and Alcohol Compliance and DOT Audits. My name is Jolene Schmidt, and I'll be facilitating today's on-demand event. Today's event is sponsored by J.J. Keller's Professional Services. With our diverse range of solutions, we address your unique needs with a blend of our services, technology, and consultants. We work to understand your operation and offer guidance based on your situation. For over 70 years, we've made safety and compliance our business so you can focus on yours. Partner with J.J. Keller Professional Services to help keep your employees safe, protect your brand, and make regulations more manageable. J.J. Keller is very proud to present part 2 of our on-demand DOT virtual live event series featuring Tom Bray and Paul Locke, presenting to a live audience at a recently recorded DOT event filmed in Green Bay, Wisconsin, near our J.J. Keller headquarters. With Tom Bray's retirement fast approaching this year, this is one of our last chances to learn directly from one of the transportation industry's most trusted voices. Due to the length of Tom's 3-hour in-person live event, we decided to split it into 2 parts for a virtual audience around the country to enjoy. This 2-part series delivers practical, up-to-date guidance to help you fully understand recent DOT regulatory changes, improve your driver compliance, and reduce audit risk. Now you're about to watch part 2, which is a 90-minute segment on the latest DOT drug and alcohol program updates, including common mistakes, related roadside inspection violations, audit and compliance reviews, as well as the 6 required drug and alcohol tests. We will also take an in-depth look at DOT audits, including the 6 factors, review types, scoring, audit preparation, and of course, how to avoid audits. But first, a little background on today's presenters. Tom Bray is a senior industry business advisor who joined the J.J. Keller content team back in 2005. Tom specializes in motor carrier safety operations management and brings over 35 years of transportation industry experience. In addition to the many publications Tom supports here at J.J. Keller, Tom's also been a frequent contributor to industry publications and websites, including Heavy Duty Trucking, truckinginfo.com, Transport Topics, Fleet Maintenance, and Work Truck. Tom is also a frequent speaker at our very own J.J. Keller live events and webcasts, as well as outside transportation safety seminars and conferences on topics such as hours of service, vehicle maintenance, cargo security, and driver fatigue. Paul Locke is an associate director of corporate field accounts at J.J. Keller, who also brings over 20 plus years of DOT transportation industry experience, advising companies on driver and vehicle compliance management issues and the solutions we have to help. Tom will be delivering the bulk of the regulatory slides here today, while Paul will be chiming in on best practices and questions. Before I pass you off to our compliance team, I do have just a few housekeeping items. First, you can find the event tools at the top of your console. There is also a resources box where you can download a copy of today's Part 2 presentation, along with other related white papers and materials. So please go ahead and download those resources right now. You will also see an upcoming event box where you can click to register to view Part 1 of our DOT virtual event on-demand series. So in case you haven't viewed Part 1 yet, click on the blue one-click registration box, automatically receive a link to the recording. For the best viewing experience, ensure that you do have a high-speed and stable internet connection. And to optimize performance, go ahead and close out any unnecessary browser tabs and applications. If you do experience audio issues or the slides aren't advancing, go ahead and refresh your browser by clicking F5. Due to this being an on-demand live event, dozens of real-world in-person audience questions were answered. So even though the event is pre-recorded today, we can still take your questions. The Q&A box is open, so please go ahead and submit your questions, and we will be sure to follow up with you after the event. Also, please be sure to stick around at the end for a poll and a chance to download a free DOT Audits white paper, and of course, complete the post-event survey. We would welcome any feedback. With that, I'm going to go ahead and kick off the recording of Part 2 today. I hope you enjoy Part 2 and of our DOT virtual event series with Tom Bray, and thank you for watching.
Yeah, and we had some good questions come in, and I had a couple of folks ask about a couple of things around drug and alcohol. So we'll try to address most of that as we kind of go through that section. But we're going to kind of focus on what are some of those common mistakes. The nice thing about in the state of Wisconsin is a commercial motor vehicle is defined at basically the 26,001
for the driver
pounds.
regulations. Yep.
Yeah, so if you're staying in the state, none of that stuff really applies until you have really big trucks and/or buses. But as you head out of the state, that's where it gets a little bit tricky, right? Because the compliance kicks in at 10,001. I've got to keep track of a driver file. I might have to do some vehicle maintenance. But do I need to do DOT drug testing at 10,001? No. I get in an accident with a commercial motor vehicle over 10,001 pounds, but less than 26,001 pounds. Is drug and alcohol testing required for post-accident? What threshold do I need to start doing post-accident drug testing? 26,001 pounds. So some of those things are recorded, some are not recorded, and Tom and I are going to kind of walk through and talk through some of those things. All right, let's answer this question together. What is your top challenge regarding drug and alcohol testing? Is it getting drivers to immediately test? Is it keeping track of that? Is it training supervisors? Not sure when to update the clearinghouse. We were talking with an individual earlier about that. So let's look at some of the inspection stats. Way in the back, you probably can't absorb those numbers, and on that little bitty sheet of paper that you're looking at, we'll share some of this. But there are more than 5,700 drug and alcohol violations during roadside inspections. Think about that. I just watched a video on the news the other day. I'm not going to list the carrier, but this vehicle was swerving all over the highway, and they pulled him over, and the individual could barely walk and/or talk. And he was under the influence. How scary is that, driving around a commercial motor vehicle that had 18 wheels on it? If you look at the compliance reviews and audits, there are almost 10,000 violations. Failing to do pre-employment, failing to conduct annual query, using a driver before the test result is back. Very tempting, happens a lot. Failing to register in the clearinghouse. So we do see a lot of additional violations there. And Tom, any additional thoughts on that? You know, a lot of questions come in tied to drug and alcohol.
Yeah, the roadside is one thing, that's the officer observing your driver. Talk about the interview and all that. Bottom one is when they come in and do an audit. What's happened, the violations that were there previous to the clearinghouse are still there. Failure to conduct pre-employment tests, failure to do random tests at the proper rate. Those are still there, but what's come to the top now are the clearinghouse violations. Because a lot of carriers to this day are not familiar with clearinghouse and still having trouble with it. So. All right, as far as the applicability of regulations, Paul kind of already alluded to this a little bit. The way Part 382 works, that's the requirements for drug and alcohol testing for commercial drivers. Part 382 is applicable if the driver has to have a CDL to operate that vehicle. One of the things people get confused about, it's not the driver having a CDL that makes them have to be drug and alcohol tested. It's operating a vehicle that requires a CDL to operate that makes it such they need to be drug and alcohol tested. So that's the applicability of Part 382. 382 that's when they have to be tested, all the different requirements for the testing. That's the requirements for running your random pool, your post-accident testing, all that stuff is found in 382. The tests the commercial driver has to go through, the records you have to keep as a carrier. Part 40 are the procedures for the testing. That's what your collection site does. That's what your lab does. That's what your MRO does. Those are all built in. That's what your SAP, if you have a driver that fails or refuses a drug test. That's all that Part 40 stuff. Part 40, by the way, is generic. It applies to all the DOT agencies. So Part 40, the whole process that's there, that applies to airline crews, that applies to railroad engineers and conductors, that applies to bus drivers, municipal bus drivers. You know, so anybody that's under DOT drug and alcohol testing, Part 40 is universal. 382, that's the ones that apply to the commercial drivers. So that's how they work, the different regulations. But the key thing is, when do they apply? Is the driver operating a vehicle that requires a CDL? All right. If a driver fails, refuses, what are the different things that'll get that so that the driver has basically done something that comes with consequences? I give you the two big ones. They fail a drug or alcohol test, they test positive, in other words, or they refuse. What else gets them in trouble?
Leaving a facility before the test has been completed.
Leaving a facility before a test is completed. They left before the test is over, or they pissed off the testing people at the collection site enough they threw them off the property. That's the type of refusal. So there's all kinds of ways drivers can get in trouble. There's the actual knowledge part. Actual knowledge means I saw the driver doing drugs or alcohol in a position where he shouldn't have been. I got a word from a previous employer through a safety performance history check that the driver had used drugs or alcohol or refused. The driver received the DUI citation in a commercial vehicle. That's considered actual knowledge. The driver used alcohol within 8 hours of a test that could require testing. That's considered actual knowledge. A driver admission comes up to me and says, I can't take that random test because I got stoned last night and I think it's still in my system. That's an admission, that's actual knowledge. Okay? So those are situations that are going to come with consequences, DOT consequences. The other ones that people like to confuse in there, what's reasonable suspicion all about? This is group participation, you get to talk. What's reasonable suspicion all about?
Someone should be under the influence where a driver will
Right. I have a trained supervisor, and both of you nailed it. I have a trained supervisor. He's done 1 hour training on misuse of alcohol, 1 hour training on indications of drug use. So I have a trained supervisor that's laid eyes on the driver. He appears to be under the influence of something. At that point, we take the driver in for a reasonable suspicion test. That's not actual knowledge, right? Actual knowledge is a different thing. Reasonable suspicion is one of my trained supervisors shouldn't have sat there, man. You know, he appears to be under the influence. We're taking him in for a test. The one that made me kind of take a deep breath one time is I was working with a customer. He said, yeah, well, we have our driver, we send them for a test. You send them, yeah, we tell them get in our car and drive down and take the test. Don't do that. We think the driver's intoxicated or under the influence and have them drive. Not cool. So that's reasonable suspicion. That's a whole different thing. If it's reasonable suspicion, we hold the driver out of service and we wait for the test to come back. Actual knowledge, there is no test. I have actual knowledge that driver misused alcohol or used drugs. So actual knowledge is different. Anyways, any of those situations, the consequences kick in. I get word tested positive and we're in an actual knowledge situation, we're in a refusal situation. What's the first thing I have to do with my driver? Get him out of the vehicles. He cannot operate commercial vehicles. But he's in Idaho. Get him out of the vehicle. You're gonna have to figure out how to get the vehicle back from Idaho, because he ain't driving no more. Once, you get word. The next thing that has to happen is the situation has to be reported into the clearinghouse. Who does the reporting to the clearinghouse? There's different people. Us as carriers. Positive alcohol test, a refusal we're involved in, an actual knowledge situation we're involved in, we have to report into the clearinghouse. If it's a positive drug test, the MRO reports it into the clearinghouse. If it involves a driver returning that's just completed his SAP evaluation and treatment, it's the SAP that does the reporting in. If it's a negative return to duty test for one of our people we're returning, we report in the negative return to duty test. When a driver finishes all their follow-ups, whatever carrier they're working for, when they're returning, they've got to do a series of follow-up tests. Whoever they're working for at that time is the one that has to report it. The carrier has to report. So there's things we have to do when it comes to this. So clearinghouse doesn't go away after this initial step, but somebody reports it at the beginning. The driver then has to do their evaluation and treatment with an SAP. Then they have to pass a return to duty test and their follow-up, just so we talked about. That's the process. Legally, under the DOT regulations, what are the steps we have to do? Do we have to run a driver through return to duty? Do we have to run a driver through follow-ups? No. As far as the DOT is concerned, we remove that driver from operating. We give them a list of acceptable SAPs, and at that point, DOT says it's up to you what you want to do from there. How many have a policy that the drivers let go?
Quite a few.
How many have a policy that you'll return the driver if X happens? It's interesting how you see that, because some companies, the driving isn't their main job. I know one big, I was going to say wire company, but that's not the right way to put it. Electrical installation, I don't know, they do overhead wires, high ampage, high voltage. They'll return people because the driver driving the truck isn't their big thing. That they have that driver there for his skills doing that. So they'll return drivers. So it just depends on your situation. Do you have to return them? No, you can choose to. All you're legally bound to do is give them a list of SAPs. At that point, it's up to you.
Great, thank you, Tom. Pre-employment drug testing. So we know, and we talked about, that we need a negative drug test back before this driver is performing any safety-sensitive functions. We did list out some exception there in 382, 301, but it requires some additional documentation, and realistically probably doesn't happen very often. But as you look at programs and ways to manage all those different types of tests that Tom was talking about, keep in mind that, you know, J.J. Keller does have a managed service that can do some of those things. Everything from pre-employment to post-accident to random, all the way through to help with tracking some of the return to duty tests in the chain of custodies and the drug and alcohol file documentation that goes along with it. Because just like a DQ file requires all those documents, there are required documents under Part 40 and 382 that are required in a drug and alcohol folder as well. Some customers will put them together and manage them under one file. In the state of Wisconsin, if you're intrastate, we know that qualifications don't kick in until you're driving a vehicle that requires a CDL. So some people put all that stuff together. But the better that the process is around organizing it in a way that's uniform and makes sense. And many of you, I know, have different locations, and therefore you get different processes, you get different types of vehicles, different types of driving classes. It can muddy it up quite a bit. But pre-employment's pretty simple. We got to make sure that we do one before we bring in a driver and before they jump in a vehicle and do any safety-sensitive functions. Did you want to talk at all about the exceptions to it?
We mentioned that earlier, talking about other things, you know, that the driver was in a program within the last 30 days, and in the course of being in that program, he was tested in the last 6 months, or he was in a random pool for more than 12 or more months. So there's an exemption there, but one of the catches to it is you got to get that other company to provide you the documentation. Yeah. You just hired their driver away. What are the odds they're going to give you the information that you need? So that's when it's there. It's not used very often. Where we see that used most often is when it's sister companies. You know, my one company is giving this driver to my other company, and he qualifies for the exemption. That's probably where we see it the most. All right, post-accident world. 382, 303, post-accident drug and alcohol testing. The alcohol testing part of it. Criteria is 8 hours. Technically, it's supposed to be done within 2 unless the driver's not available because of the responsibilities at the scene. You get an automatic 6 hours extension. Somebody just needs to document why, but it gives you a total of 8. How many of you have ever had a driver able to get off of a serious crash site within 2 hours? Notice my hand's not going up. But 8 hours, yeah, you can do that. Is alcohol testing required after every crash? No. The criteria is there's a fatality or a citation was issued following an injury or tow-away accident. That's the criteria, and that's the only time you can do alcohol testing. If you want to do a testing outside of that, you want to test after every accident, you can, but that other stuff's got to be done under your company drug and alcohol testing policy. Cannot be done under your DOT policy. The DOT says you can only do these post-accident tests. Okay? Where there's a little confusion here, what's the criteria for a DOT recordable accident as far as your accident register goes? This is group participation, you get to talk. Tow away?
Yeah, first nurse or tow.
Hearse, nurse, or tow? You guys just get, everybody's throwing out pieces, put them all together. There was a fatality, injury requiring treatment away from the scene, or a vehicle had to be towed due to disabling damage. That makes it DOT recordable. That has to go on your register. What if the driver didn't get a citation? It goes on your register. What if the other driver was at fault? It goes on your register. What's your register showing? All DOT crashes you were involved in, their fault, nobody's fault, tickets, no ticket, doesn't make any difference. When it comes to drug and alcohol testing in the post-accident world, fatality or citation issued for an injury or towaway. That's what triggers the need for DOT post-accident alcohol testing. Drug testing uses the same criteria, except what? You got more time. What's your limit for getting the post-accident drug test done? 32 hours. 8 for alcohol, 32 for drug, but everything else stays the same as far as the criteria. Here's the question for you, and this is something to go home and think about. You don't have to actually answer this. This is not group participation unless you want it to be. Do you have the ability to test a driver in central Montana at 2 a.m. on a Saturday? You have to have that capability, because what if your driver's involved in a fatality crash at 2 a.m. in central Montana on a Saturday? You're going to have that alcohol test within 8, drug within 32. So you have to have that capability in your back pocket. So whose responsibility is it to get the testing done? The driver's or ours? It's ours.
Come on, Tom. You know all accidents happen between 8 and 4:30 on Monday through Friday.
In a well-populated area with lots of clinics.
Let's talk about random testing. So when we look at the first bullet there of it being unannounced, we're not supposed to tell individuals that are in the program that they're probably going to be tested. So they would probably fail that requirement. And then make sure you're evenly spacing it out. Some of you do it maybe monthly or quarterly, maybe biannually, but we can't basically say we're going to do it one time a year. We need to spread it out and spread it out evenly. And an equal chance of being tested for the selection. So we can't use a hat and throw the names in the hat and shake the hat up in the air and pick it and say, you know what, we picked Earl last time, put his name back in the hat and let's draw another name out of the hat. Make sure you have a scientific random generation process, a software, web-based system, some kind of solution to pull out that information. And then also make sure you're keeping track of it. I remember I would get selected multiple times a year, and we would actually keep the documentation of who was selected and who was not selected. That was something that was kind of important to hang on to that. And a question that came up here was consortium being in your own, you get to choose. So if you're a carrier and you want to have your 20 drivers be in your own little pool, you can do that. If you want to jump into a consortium and mix it up with other carriers or other drivers that fall under Part 382, you can do that. And you know, if you have 1,000 drivers in that pool and we're pulling on what are the percentages today for alcohol and drug, 10% for alcohol and 50% for drug, you stand a chance where maybe some of your drivers are not selected quite as often if I'm in a consortium. So in here, how many of you use a consortium today or a part of a consortium? Okay. Good handful of you.
To answer the question that probably that one comes from, so long as your consortium makes the numbers. Your company doesn't need to make it, your consortium does, the 10 and 50, so.
Ultimately, an audit happens, Tom. I got to get all the information. I got to have the reporting. Who's responsible for that if I'm in a consortium?
If you're in a consortium, they keep the records. If you're audited, they provide you with the records from the consortium testing, so.
If you're in one of those, make sure if you went through an audit, they could prepare that information for you. Okay, go through that mock audit process. Where are our vehicle records? Oh, we outsource those, or it's a Penske or Ryder or somebody's. Make sure you can get that information in the event of an audit. Okay.
All right, reasonable suspicion testing. We talked about this a little bit already. Alcohol. You can only do alcohol reasonable suspicion testing before, during, or immediately after safety-sensitive functions. This is Wisconsin. I could have busted every one of my drivers on a Saturday night if it wouldn't have been for that rule. Because where could I find most of my drivers on Friday and Saturday nights if they weren't driving? Having a fish fry and a few beers, old fashions, whatever their flavor of choice was. Is that legal for them to do on a Friday night when they're not working? Yeah. So that's why the before, during, or after duty for the alcohol component, as far as random and for reasonable suspicion. Can't walk in the bar on Saturday night and say, you're really screwed up, let's go for a reasonable test. Controlled substance, that's a different matter. Anytime the driver's at work, if he's on my property, he looks to be impaired under drugs, let's go. But I got to base my decisions on appearance, body odor, speech. One of you is going to select me now for a random, or for a reasonable suspicion, rather. It's got to be something observable and articulable. I've got to be able to write down and explain what I saw that made me believe this person was under the influence of one or the other, drugs or alcohol, or both. When I do that, away we go. Let's go get the test done. We're going to go do this. That's the reasonable suspicion process. What's the training required? 1 hour for drug, 1 hour for alcohol. Okay? How many times do you have to train your supervisors? Just once. It's a one and done. I will make the case for you. I do drug recognition, something I got trained at in my other life. I have a matrix that's running in my head whenever I contact somebody that's not right. Okay, I'll rephrase that. That appears to be under the influence of something, because I run into a lot of people that just aren't right. But they appear to be under the influence of something. I have a matrix that's running through my mind at all times, because I've been trained on it, and I train on it every 2 years because of my other life. Your average supervisor at your company, when's the last time they made contact with somebody who appeared to be under the influence and had to actually run that matrix in their mind? They did the training for you 10 years ago. What are the odds they remember that whole thing? So even though it's not required, what do you think is probably a pretty good idea? Get your supervisors in and retrain them on this somewhat regularly. So they've got that matrix running in their mind when they're looking at somebody. It's like, boy, his eyes are, okay, I've been beating up on you so bad. His eyes, something's wrong. His gate's off. Ooh, I know what that smells like. You know, so that your supervisors are thinking about that.
What are the acceptable methods for drug testing? Tom was talking a little bit about this earlier, but urine and oral fluid, saliva, comes up a lot. When do you think we're going to do the hair testing? When do you think we're going to allow some blood specimen for testing? And I think, Tom, you mentioned it earlier. We're a long ways away.
Hair's a long way away, and blood's just not going to become a, just not going to become a thing. Does law enforcement use blood? Yes. They get warrants. That's invasive. So it's a whole different scenario for them.
Those are the methods tethered to testing. And then what about the retention? So just like on the driver qualification file side, the drug and alcohol side, there is some retention. Absorb some of this up here. 5 years for anything that's a failed alcohol test or positive drug test. Right? 3 years is something that we hear a lot about, but remember that if you have drug and alcohol tests that are positive and or failed, 5 years is the retention period. 3 years for anything clearinghouse for queries in the consent forms. And then a year if you have any alcohol tests that are less than 0.02 or negative canceled drug tests. So do you have a system or a process to track all of that information? So in the event of an audit, and they say, let's take a look at all your tests that you've had over the last year. Now let's look at the clearinghouse queries and some of the documentation tied to that. And oh, have you ever had a driver test positive for drugs and or alcohol? Be prepared to have all that information. And we got to make sure that it's in a secured location with controlled access. Can't walk into your office and just have a filing cabinet with the drawers opening up. There better be a lock on that filing cabinet. So we will look at that a lot when we come in and do our mock audits, or we look at a diagnostic audit. We'll walk through an organization and we'll put all of that to the test. Show us your DQ files. Let's lay them out. Let's see if they're consistent. Show us your drug and alcohol policy. Where's the supervisors that were trained for drug and alcohol? Show us that paperwork. Walk us into your drug and alcohol files. Show us your chain of custodies. Show us your tests. Show us your paperwork. So if that's something that you're kind of interested in and you're like, you know what, we really don't know, check the box on that yellow sheet to maybe learn a little bit more. So as we wrap up and we look at the questions for drug and or alcohol testing, we gave an update on drug and alcohol regs. There was, consortium kind of being on your own. We talked about that. And then reasonable suspicion. I think, Tom, you kind of touched on that. And let's see if there was any additional questions, or raise your hand if you want to shout out any additional questions tied to drugs and or alcohol from the group.
Yeah, the old-fashioned way it works, you can just ask. Here, a question just for everybody in the room. What about my non-CDL drivers? Do they need to be in this? They are not. You cannot have your non-CDL drivers in your DOT testing program. So if they're operating non-CDL vehicles for you, they are not in your DOT testing program. It doesn't mean if they're a commercial vehicle, doesn't matter. It's got to be a vehicle that requires a CDL for the DOT drug and alcohol testing to kick in. No drug testing for them. Okay?
How many of you do test your non-CDL drivers that drive a commercial motor vehicle? Quite a few of you. We're seeing a lot of trends going towards, doesn't matter if you're in a company car, forklift, sheet machinery out in the field, or some kind of pickup truck with a trailer on it. It's just, it helps you be in a real good defendable position when you've got programs and policies in place to be a little bit more proactive than what the law tells you to do. Tom?
I have a question. If I want to test my non-CDL drivers in drug and alcohol testing, can I put them in my DOT driver pool and test them there? Wow, you guys are really good. Everybody's shaking their head. No. They've got to be tested under the regular Department of Labor zero tolerance workplace test. They're not in your DOT program. So if you're going to do that, you just have to have two separate programs. Here's my DOT driver program. Here's my non-CDL driver program for testing other employees, including my non-CDL drivers. No, so long as you're not hauling in commerce. So there's a distinction there because you can get by. There's an exception having to do with drug and alcohol testing and DQ files, where if the driver is not working for me, we are not hauling in commerce. There's an exemption there for doing road testing. If I take him out to haul a load to do the road test at the same time, yeah, he's got to be drug tested. You have to have a DQ file. Everything has to be in place and in play. So that's the key distinction there.
So it needs to be negative before duty.
Negative before duty if he's going to haul freight for you as part of the road test. Some people do double duty. They don't just do simple road tests. Let's go load a load and haul it. We're going to call it your road test. Well, if you're going to do that, then you do need negative results through the drug and alcohol testing. You have to have the query results. You have to have a DQ file before you can do any of that, versus just doing a road test.
Great, thank you. Well, let's roll into our next section, and we're going to talk about DOT audits and compliance reviews, kind of the 6 factors of what breaks down a DOT audit or a compliance review. Anybody want to share with us how your audit went? I saw some individuals raise their hand to say that they've been through that process, or maybe it was more of a focused audit, or maybe you were new to it and you got a DOT number and you went through a new entrant audit. Anybody want to share how that process went for you and your organization?
The HR manager at the time had told me that the questionnaire that was in our file, that do you have this file, do you have this, do you have this? I kept asking her, I'm like, do we need these things? And she said, no, you're fine. And then she left, and then I had the compliance review and found out I had nothing. I had to get applications from every driver. It was interesting. They were supposed to come back 6 months later to make sure I did everything I was supposed to. So it's been 15 and a half years.
Wow. Well, let's hope the
15 years
process
late.
got a little better over the last 16 years. I would count your lucky stars and thank God they didn't come.
We went through our company. We have 2 different companies. We started a new DOT number, so we went through a new entrant audit with that, which was pretty easy. I mean, they're not easy, but painless.
Low key.
Yeah. But then also the company that Mike works for here that I also manage, they went from intrastate to an interstate carrier. And so we had to go through a new entrant audit for that as well. And if any of you go through an audit and you're going through and doing your DQ files and you're making sure everything's good, the one piece of advice I can give to you is go into your CSA score, review your inspections, find your worst drivers, and make sure that their files are good, because over both audits, those are the people that they picked, were the naughty drivers.
100% correct. They have a selection criteria, no matter what category it is, drivers, vehicles, any of the driver areas. They're going to want your drivers that were involved in crashes, your drivers that were placed out of service, drivers that received violations in that area, and your drivers that were hired within 12 months. And then randomly, if we don't have enough for our sampling, give us 2 others. So that's where it's nice to know, I have these 10 DQ files that are perfect. So if they ever ask you, I need a few more, you've got the perfect ones to give them. So yeah, that's their selection criteria. Same with their vehicles. They don't randomly ask for truck 123's maintenance record. 123 was involved in a crash. It was placed out of service. It had a lot of mechanical violations over the last year. There's a reason they're asking for that vehicle. Same principle. They don't want to see your best and brightest. The audit that I went through was in 95. Came out of it with a satisfactory rating. They kept asking for this one particular, I won't name his name. I named his name by accident at an event recently. They kept asking for this one driver, and when they first asked for it, we fired him. That's nice. Still want his DQ file. They get the drug and alcohol. We want to see X's file. We fired him. Still want to see his files. And that's when I caught on to that. Wait, I know why they're asking for him. Why did we fire him? He piled up a truck after receiving all kinds of on-road violations, and he'd only worked for us for about less than a year. But whenever they started a new topic area during the audit, we want to see his records related to this. Oh, and by the way, he was driving truck 123, so we want the maintenance records for 123. Her question is, you guys basically shut down your carrier and sold it to another entity. Yes, you still need those records for the time that you got to maintain them. Maintenance records 6 months after you lose control of the vehicles. DQ file 3 years, so there's the tail ending things that come with those records that they can still come back and ask you about. Are they typically going to? Not unless they think it's a chameleon carrier situation. How many have heard that term? What's a chameleon carrier? I'm not doing so good, or I got a really big fine, so I'm shutting down this DOT number and opening up this one. It's the same trucks, same drivers, same buses, same drivers, same whatever. They're just now under this other DOT number. That's called chameleon carrier. So that's when they start hunting down the previous entity a lot of times. So.
Great, good examples. Tom, can you talk to us about safety audits and some of the different types of reviews?
Safety audits. What a safety audit is, we talked about these already. There's the new entrant audit and Mexican carrier, which is a pre-authority, which is similar to a new entrant. These are done to make sure the carrier's on the right track, getting going. The only downside to them is they're typically done, the Mexican pre-authorization are done before they operate into the U.S., but the regular new entrants are done within the first 6 to 18 months of getting the DOT number. The downside is if you're goofing up and making mistakes, you've got 6 to 18 months worth of mistakes for them to see. So if you're a new carrier starting out, you got to make sure you're getting it right, because those are the records they're going to come in and look at. Talked about those already. Typically, they're going to be educational. Then there's your reviews. There's on-site comprehensive. That's what's called the compliance review. Those are, who's been through one of those? They walk in at the front door and they check everything on their way out, and they go out the back. They're checking your driver applications to make sure they has everything on, was within 30 days of hire. The driver signed it. It has the rebuttal statement. You'd be surprised, that's just on the application. I'm not even getting warmed up. I mean, the previous employment for 3 years, for 7 additional, for any CDL driving. That's just the application. And they're going to do that for X number of drivers. Okay, now we want to see your safe performance histories for these drivers. So away it goes. That's a compliance review. They check everything. Vehicles, that's what we're going to talk about in a minute here. There's also on-site focus, where they come and your company is only having trouble in this area. So they're going to check your general qualifications as a company, your general stuff, but they're going to focus in on hours of service, because that's what your on-road data is showing you have a problem in that area. And that area pretty much is it. Or driver qualifications. Best kind of audit to get is an off-site, where they just contact you and say, use the portal at the CSA or use your portal. There's different places they can do it, and send us these documents electronically. 2 advantages. Where's the investigator when this investigation's going on? Not at your place. Okay, so he's not going to stumble across Billy Bob, your driver that doesn't know when to keep his mouth shut. So, you've eliminated all that stuff. The other thing is, if it's offsite, they typically are lighter on their documents request. They're not going to ask for 100 driver's qualifications files. They'll pick a half dozen and say, send us these. So it's a lot less as far as the volume goes. Then you end up with what's called, sometimes you get non-rated. Those are security things. Those are drug and alcohol strike force audits, where they come and they're there for a separate reason. Or it's been focused and they didn't check enough of the areas to come out of it with a rating. So you get what's called a non-rated. So those are the different types.
Great, thanks, Tom. On CSA, Tom, when you go in and you see that rating down at the bottom, some people have gone through audits, but if you see that it says not rated, what does that mean?
That's what that's, they went through an investigation, but it was one that didn't result in a rating. So a security check, focused offsite, something along those lines.
So if I'm not rated, am I considered more at risk? Am I okay?
Nope. Means you're not rated.
Okay. We
Where
won't
you,
ask.
how many are not rateds as far as you know for your safety rating? Some of you probably are, yeah. Is that a good thing or bad? It's a non-thing. It means you just haven't been audited. You haven't gone through a full audit to get a rating yet. Which makes either here nor there. Company I was with, our rating is still valid to this day from our audit we went through in 1995. We've had several when I was there, we had a couple. Several non-rated things happen in between, but that company is still standing on audit from 1995.
And the reason I bring it up is insurance plays such a big part into how we're, how we pay and how we're measured as a carrier now with you having satisfactory rating or even a conditional rating. Many carriers call Keller or companies, say, we're conditional. We don't want to be conditional. We want to get satisfactory again. How do we get off that conditional rating without getting more exposure and go potentially the other way where we're unsatisfactory? So,
yeah, the way you get that done, by the way, 385-17 is the process. Send them information saying that we fixed all these things when you were here and did your audit. It's called asking for an upgrade based on corrective actions. You send in proof that we fixed these things. They review it and they upgrade your rating if it meets their approval. What's the downside to doing that? What's the risk? They may decide they want to verify that you actually did all that. How are they going to verify that? It's called a follow-up. Yeah. Hi, we're here to see you. You sent us this stuff in the mail. So whatever you send them that you fixed, guess what you really, really need to make sure is actually true? We're doing those things and we fixed those things, so.
yeah, one of the areas that we work with a lot of companies on, including some of this in this room, is we come in and we do a diagnostic audit. And it's a little bit more than just a mock audit of 6 factors. We're looking at policies and procedures and also business best practices and making sure that what your policies say you adhere to. So it's much more extensive and it's quite affordable, to be honest with you, but it puts you in a defendable position in the event that you're going to go from conditional back up to satisfactory. So I encourage people to have somebody that's a professional come in, make sure you're getting things back in order before you invite the DOT to come in and check on their own.
By the way, if you send them everything looks cool, you've addressed everything on paper, they probably won't come see you. Notice the word there?
Or you might get lucky and have the 15-year thing and not hear from them for a long time. Violation types, there's a couple of them out there. It's kind of backwards in my mind if I think about it, but when you think critical, it's not nearly as severe as an acute. So if I have an acute violation, that is really a noncompliance to a severe situation. Came in, no drug and alcohol program, acute. Came in, no hours of service program. I didn't think I had to have hours of service, acute. If there's a breakdown in the process and or operational controls, or we're seeing trends that tell us that things are not really following management controls or the safety management cycle, there's a really good chance that you're going to get hit with some critical violations. And that's really where in our diagnostic audit, we come through and we identify those greatest areas of risk. Where are your acute situations? Do you have any? Do you know that you have any? Where are the mid-risk areas, the critical factors that there is a breakdown in the process, you're doing okay, but you might be exposed to some areas of risk? And what are those areas that you're doing really well? And then identifying and prescribing a path forward on how to fix it. A lot of companies will come in and tell you what's wrong. You might be able to even tell yourself what's wrong, but do you know the path or how to prescribe to fix it? Okay, just keep that in mind. But those violation types are super important to make sure that you understand it and make sure that you don't fall into one of those acute factors.
Yeah, the critical violations, the key number is 10%.
Yeah.
So if they come in because of the size of your fleet, they're checking out 1,500 logs, and they're checking them for 8-hour, 11-hour, 14-hour, 60, 70 limits violations. They're checking them for false entries. They're checking for missing data, form and matter. That's what they're checking for. So if more than 10% of those logs have an 11-hour driving violation, you've now violated one of the critical regulations. You're over that 10% threshold. So if you had 150 logs that had a problem, you're going to get dinged for having violated a critical regulation. So that's how when they mentioned about there that it relates to a pattern. You don't have the controls in place to manage this correctly. The acutes, like Paul mentioned, that stuff like not having a drug and alcohol program. Boom, one done, you're in trouble. Criticals are looking at 10% of what they check.
How do we avoid reviews? Some of the questions and comments that came in, Tom, were tethered to that. And, we kind of work it backwards and say, well, if you don't want to have CSA scores above certain thresholds, make sure they're below those thresholds, and there's a good chance that you will avoid a review. Make sure that people aren't blowing the whistle on you. Follow up with your drivers. Follow up with complaints. Do you have the phone number on the side of the vehicles as they're running down the road? And when somebody calls and says, hey, your vehicle just cut me off, are you following up on that? Are you using the video camera footage that you have to go back through and do some corrective action training or remedial training to make sure that those things don't happen? Another way to avoid that review is don't ask for follow-up. Don't request it. If you're going to go out there, make sure you've got your stuff in order to make sure that they don't come in and white glove it and make it worse than it was originally. And then crash is the big one, right? We're all preparing for that. Nobody wants to think about it, but you really are preparing for the event that something happens. And even if it was not preventable, you have a very large area of risk and exposure based off of your brand and just being where you are. I mean, we hear horror stories and see it all the time. Somebody's high on a motorcycle, on cocaine, going 80 miles an hour. You're sitting at a stoplight, and that motorcycle plows into the back of your vehicle. Your compliance records are accurate. Everything seems to be okay. And they start digging in a little bit, and a plaintiff's attorney finds something that says, wait a minute, we found something. That vehicle should not have been at that stoplight because of X or this little thing. Therefore, Billy isn't going home to his family now because your vehicle was there, even though they crashed into it. I hate to bring it up, but it comes up so often that it's just something to really think about. And that's how we try to avoid some of those reviews and get in those undefendable positions.
I have a real life experience having to do with this from our great state here. A dump truck, nothing wrong, rolling down a county highway, car pulls out of a stop sign right in front of him. He could do nothing. Hit the brakes, hit the car, rolled it up into the ditch. Bad in all kinds of ways. Motor carrier inspector comes out because they're expecting this to go fatal. They find vice grips holding brake lines to 2 of the 10 brake chambers closed. Why are vice grips on brake lines? That's one way to solve a leaky brake chamber. Just don't let air go to it anymore. They run the driver's license. The motor carrier inspector runs the driver's license, just like the county cops did originally, and found out the driver had a suspended CDL. So what happened to this concept? They were not at fault at all. This other person came through a stop sign and hit their truck. It's out the window. That's one of those where you know what your defense attorney is going to tell you? The only thing we're going to argue about is how much we're paying. So post-crash is a big deal. All right, CSA scores, now a happier topic. CSA score accounts for well over 90% of the audits. So if you've got your CSA scores under control, what are the odds you're going to get an audit? They go down considerably. So there's a happy thought for you. Unless, of course, your CSA scores are over the threshold in any of the basics, then that's not a happy thought for you. So what is CSA? The SMS and CSA is designed to locate non-compliant and unsafe carriers. Takes your data, runs it through a bunch of formulas, creates what's called your basic measure in the different basics. Unsafe driving, crash, hours of service, driver fitness, vehicle maintenance, drug and alcohol. There's the 7 basics. Hazardous materials. They generate what's called a basic measure within there based on your performance. When you look at that basic measure number in CSA, that's you. What they do with that basic measure then is they compare it to carriers that have a similar exposure. In unsafe driving, they're comparing it to carriers that have had similar number of inspections with an unsafe driving violation. Hours of service, they're comparing it to similar carriers that have had roughly the same number of driver inspections. So they're comparing you to similar carriers based on your on-road experience. And that is where your score comes from. How do you compare to your group? Best carrier in your group gets a score of 0. Worst carrier gets a score of 100. And then inside there, they assign a threshold. If you're above this, if you're above 80 in driver fitness, you have a problem if you're a general carrier. Sorry, passenger carriers have lower thresholds. So do hazmat carriers. They like picking on different people. But if you're above the threshold, something's going to happen. That's the way this works. So that's how the process goes. You get your measure is compared out to other carriers, similar carriers. That measure compared generates score. That's your exposure. Above the threshold, you might get audited. Below. By the way, if you're above the threshold, as well as taking the risk of being audited, you go above the threshold in any of the basics, you can expect more roadside inspections. One of the interventions they talk about in the CSA world is targeted roadside inspections. How many are familiar with the term called ISS? Inspection Selection System. This is another reason to go to that day on a scale thing. A trooper on the road or a motor carrier inspector can type in your DOT number. It brings up a screen, gives them a number from 0 to 100. You want 50 or you want under 50, 49 or less. And it gives them a little stop and go light, red, yellow, green. Red means inspect this carrier every time you see them on the road. They have big problems. Yellow is telling the officer, if you can free up floor space, go ahead and inspect them. Green means let them go. They're doing well. Where do they get the numbers and where does the data come from to figure out this ISS system with a little stoplight that the officer sees? It's your CSA scores. If you're over the threshold in any of the basics, you're going to be in at least the optional category, which is the yellow light on their little symbol, or red, which is the inspect category, which is the one where make time to inspect them. So the other consequence of your CSA scores.
Thanks, Tom. On roadside inspections, Tom talked a little bit about the ISS score and kind of how we equate to those numbers. But think about some of the reasons that might cause roadside inspections to create a review. Driving violation, vehicles seen are driving erratic or maybe deviation of lane, speeding. Huge, easy, simple way to cause a inspection that would lead to a review. Visible, I see it, all right? Old dirty truck and trailer comes through. I'm gonna inspect all the dirty vehicles today. We've seen it. I've been a part of those, at those scales when they pull those vehicles over. Lights, right? The old BLTs, it's been that way forever. Way back in the early 90s when I was working on trucks. Brakes, lights, tires. Fast forward all those years, what's the problem? Brakes, lights, and tires. Electronic screening, Tom talked about the ISS. Post-accident, obviously, is going to probably prompt some kind of review in the event that there's some kind of fatality or maybe multi-person injury, et cetera, and or random. And those inspections, based off of what you mentioned, what percentage are random?
Oh, the random inspections are it depends on state.
Gotcha.
In Wisconsin here, we've always had our commander that's overseen the motor carrier since I've been in the industry going back to the 80s. We're not going to inspect good trucks and good drivers. We just don't have the troopers available, the motor carrier inspectors available. So in Wisconsin, about 85 to 90% of our roadside inspections lead to a violation. I'll reverse that on you. 85, 90% of the time, the officer already saw a violation when they brought you in. So what's that other 5 to 10% you're seeing? Those are the randoms. I've got a good short tail relation that does inspections in this area. He hates getting put on the random detail, where his job at that point is to go Highway 10 between this point and this point, inspect the truck. As soon as that one's released, grab the next one. Wisconsin troopers hate doing that because how have they been trained over the years? Use one of these other reasons to do an inspection. Don't just start grabbing them, but then they have to do random for statistical reasons. Other states, they have what are called the probable cause states. A road officer cannot pull your truck over for an inspection unless your driver commits a violation. So what's your random rate in those states? So what do you see on those roadside inspections in those states? about 90 to 100% of your inspections already have a violation on them because they had to have a violation, visible violation to do the inspection. So random is a component. But when you look at the other reasons, most roadside inspections, they're not random. The officer saw something that raised their attention.
Thanks, Tom. As we wrap this up and kind of roll into what the 6 factors are, let's talk a little bit about intervention escalation. How many of you received a warning letter before that said, hey, we need you to fix something? I've seen some heads bob, a couple of hands going up. They're basically saying, hey, here's something that we're seeing. We want you to fix it. Take the time to fix it. Focus reviews. We're going to come in for an off-site or an on-site review, but we're going to be focused on maybe one particular basic or one particular area within compliance. We've seen an uptick in that. And then obviously the on-site comprehensive, which is a full compliance review. We're coming in, we're going to do the 6 factors and review those, and we're going to kind of roll into what those are right now.
All right, 6 factors. When they come in and do an audit, what the 6 factors are, compliance review, focused, whatever it is, this is how they organized themselves. There's general, driver, operational, vehicle, hazardous materials, and accident. Those are the 6 factors they're called. Each factor is scored except accident, which is based on your accident rate. But each of the other 5 are scored based on your violations. What are the 2 types of violations they're looking for? This was like 3 slides ago. Acute and critical, very good. Those are the kind they're looking for. There are other violations they'll find, but the ones they worry about are the acute and critical. Those are the ones that are going to hit you as a carrier when it comes to your rating. So what ends up happening is each factor gets assigned points. Those points decide a rating for that factor, and then your overall rating as a carrier is based on how you did in the 6 factors. We'll get into that process a little bit towards the end. So the first factor, the general factor, it's done during all audits and investigations. And it's basically looking at your company stuff, your general stuff that you have to do as a company. Do you have the your financial responsibilities, the fancy we say in insurance? Do you have the correct insurance for your operation? 750, 1 million, 5 million, what do you have? Do you have an accident register, and do you have accident files for each of your accidents? Back it up, back those up. Are all your filings current? Are all your vehicles marked? Because they'll go out and wander your yard, see how your vehicles are marked. Plus, they have on-road information about how you did during roadside inspections. Big one in here, they're looking for any false statements. Whatever you say to that investigator, the records better reflect it. Otherwise, that's a problem. And this one isn't tied to any CSA basics. This is just a general category they do to kick off every investigation or audit.
Factor 2 is tethered to a couple of basics, drug and alcohol and driver fitness. So that's kind of a biggie when you think about, what we've talked about today, both the drug and alcohol topic and what's required for driver qualification files. So the subparts in the book, Tom's got one of the large green books. Somebody can take that home with them today if you feel like bringing it home. You have the pocket book, which inside the first page of the pocket book, what is on that first page? Does anybody know? It's a receipt page. Who signs the receipt page? The driver. What is it basically saying, or what are they telling? What do we do with that receipt? What is it? That I received the book and what? And I acknowledge and understand what's going on in the book. I see those books in truck. They look like they've never been opened, and they're just there. They're a staple, right? Back in the 80s when Tom started, that's when the book started. No. But it's super important because the plaintiff's attorney, they're piecing that all together. We got the book, the driver signed the receipt, it's in the folder, you got the file, we've trained supervisors, we have people in place to manage this stuff, your policies and procedures say you're going to do it. So when they come in and they start white gloving this, make sure you've got everything in order. And somebody said it earlier, find your bad drivers. Those are the ones they're going to look at. When we do pilots of cameras, everybody says, give me your best drivers. I don't know if that's the best thing. Give us the ones that are really going to cause some challenges or challenge the process a little bit to make sure that you've got good processes in place so that when corrective action happens, you've got a way to go through and do some of that remedial training and make sure it's not just a continual loop of a headache, which I'm sure some of you are in that loop.
All right, factor 3 is where the rubber meets the road. It's the operational section, operational factor. Do you use drivers that are under the influence, ill, or fatigued? How do they know that? Your roadside inspection reports. Because part of the pre-work for the investigator, they are going to go through every roadside inspection involving your fleet for the past 12 months. They have them on file at FMCSA. They are going to look through them. If you got a problem with this, they're going to see it. They're going to check your schedules. They do a backwards way of doing that. If you have a whole bunch of hours of service violations, what's that telling them? You're putting your drivers under pressure to get deliveries done. Therefore, how's your scheduling practices? Not so cool. Cell phone use and texting, here again, off roadside inspection reports, cargo securement. That's going to be found two ways. One is your roadside inspection history. The other is they're going to go out in your yard. If you tell them that truck is ready to go, they're going to go out and inspect it. Hours of service is a big chunk in this one. They're going to spend a lot of time going through your driver's records of duty status, logs, making sure you have logs when they're required. They're the right type of logs. The drivers are staying under the hours of service limits. Everything's on the records. How long does it take an auditor to go through one log? Anybody ever been through this? It's 5 minutes on that one log, because they're taking the one log, they're going to take a look at the logs on either side of it, then they're going to go back 7 days with that log, whether it's paper or electronic. And okay, now we're done with 1 day, let's move to the next. This is why they find things in audits they don't find on the roadside. Because the roadside officers, they're to get them turned and burned. Get the inspection done, get them out of here. During an audit, what's the mindset? I'm going to go through every line on this log, then I'm going to look at one on either side of it, go through every line on those logs, then I'm going to go back the previous 7 days and go through every line on those logs. Now I'm going to move ahead 1 day. So it's a whole different environment when it comes to it. CSA areas this ties to: unsafe driving, vehicle maintenance, as far as cargo securement, and hours of service compliance. Okay, when it comes to the violations written in this area, hours of service fire and away takes the lead. Think of it this way: if you got any questionable logs in there and they're taking that amount of time to look through them, are they going to find them? Oh yeah. Factor 4 is the vehicle factor. Do you have maintenance schedules for each unit, and are you meeting those maintenance schedules? Who sets the maintenance schedule for your fleet? Who decides how often my Freightliner 120s are going to come in for maintenance? You do. You tell them every month we bring it in for a safety inspection. Every 2 months we bring it in for a PMB and a service. Every 6 months we bring it in for this. Every year we bring it in for that. Okay, now let's see the maintenance files. What are they expecting to see in those maintenance files? Whatever you told them you do. Okay, so that's how they're going to do it. So you need mechanisms to make sure that those maintenance activities are getting done at the right time and they're being met. Make sure the drivers know them and the maintenance department knows them, of course. The other thing I'm going to look at in this factor: are you repairing defects? If a roadside inspection report comes in listing a defect, when was that defect addressed? The day of the inspection, or when the DVR was written that night before the vehicle operated the next morning? You need to have records showing that. If the vehicle is placed out of service due to a mechanical defect, what do you need a maintenance record showing, a repair record showing? It was fixed before it operated again. It was towed into the shop. Here's the tow record. Here's the record of repair. Here's when it went back into service and was operated again. You need to have that trail. Getting all your annual inspections done before the due date. That's one of those that's just amazing when you look at the audit and roadside data, that one turns up constantly in both. It's a simple function. If I did an annual inspection on my truck today, somebody help me, what's today's date? June something, right? June 10th. If I did my annual inspection on June 10th, when's the next one due? Technically June 10th, but they give it to the end of the month. So June 30th next year, it has to be done. How long do I have to prepare for that annual inspection on that vehicle? 365 days plus. I get that grace period. So it's amazing that we still miss that in the industry. Documents showing everything, and we have to have qualified technicians. Technicians are going to do annual inspections or brake work. They have to have a year experience. They have to have training in that area to be able to do it if you're going to do it in-house. If you're using somebody else, it's their business to make sure that they're qualified. But whose fault is it if you're using a shop that doesn't have qualified technicians to do annual inspections? Falls back on you. So verify with your maintenance organizations. If you're using Billy Bob's backwater truck repair, you might want to ask them, are your technicians qualified in these areas? If you're using somebody like Penske or, one of the big maintenance, a little different.
Go ahead, Tom, bring us home.
All right, hazmat. Has anybody ever seen the actual hazmat regulations? This many? Or this many? This is the book sitting on its side, right? A lot there. When they come into this one, this is kind of like hours of service. They sit down at your desk in there and they camp on it. You have to have bills of ladings for everything you moved in the last 12 months available during an audit. Shipment records if you don't use bills of ladings. Shipment documents, basically. If it involves hazardous materials, that's their trigger. Okay, are you authorized to haul that? How did you haul it? Let's see the roadside inspections involving hazmat. Was this driver trained? They just kind of burrow right down into it. Okay, now we have this other shipment paperwork or this other roadside inspection involving hazmat, and they drill right down into that one, start to finish. Very in-depth process. How many of you haul hazmat? Placarded or unplacarded, doesn't make any difference. The process is the same. Just a warning for the rest of you that don't think you're hauling hazmat. You might be. If it's not placarded, doesn't mean you're off the hook. Last but not least is your accident factor. What's the definition of an accident as far as they're concerned? This is a call back to about an hour ago. Hearse, nurse, or toll. That's a nice and fast way to think of it. What they do is they take your accident register, they take their crash data they have, because officers report your accidents into FMCSA, so they have a database. You have your register. They put them together to come up with a list of all accidents. They divide that by millions of miles. How many accidents per million miles are you having? If you're above 1.5, because most of us are regular carriers and they're not operating entirely within 100 miles of our facilities. Below that, you pass. Above it, you fail. This is a pass-fail. Okay? It's tied to the crash basic. There's a mechanism in here to be aware of. You can ask the investigator to pull out non-preventable crashes. They don't automatically do it. So you have to say, this one, it was not preventable. My driver couldn't have prevented it. Please pull it out. They'll say, give us the crash report. They'll confer over it and they'll decide if it is truly not preventable. They'll pull it out of that calculation, which can help you if you're at 1.52 and they pull that one out of there, it gets you down to 1.45, we did it. So that can make a difference.
How many of you have heard of the safety management cycle and used some of it to adhere to your policies and procedures? Some of you. It's really a great way to take really any process within your organization and just walk through the wheel of the safety management cycle and ask yourself, do we have the policies and procedures in place? Are the roles and the people and the responsibilities accurate? Have we tested them? Do we have the right people handling it? When somebody says, who's handling the DVIRs, I walk into a business and they're like, well, that ain't me. Right? Who's handling that stuff? Qualifications and hiring. Do we know who those people are? Have we tested it? Have we walked through it? Do we have the folders from J.J. Keller? Do we fill them out exactly? Are we using a software? Are we using Encompass? Or what type of program to manage that? Training and communication. Training, training, training. We are seeing a lot of exposure tethered to training. We brought some of our VR stuff today. We talk about it. How many of you still have our old VHS tapes hanging in your office? I've seen them. I've been in your offices. Monitoring and tracking. So do you trust but verify? That's a phrase we like to use a lot. Trust your folks, trust your processes, but verify it. Walk through it. And then meaningful action. Could we support ourselves in the event of a DOT audit? Could we support ourselves in the event of an OSHA audit? If the EPA were to walk in today, or the HR consultants, would we pass an audit when it comes to those types of regulations? That is a super important piece. Understand it, know it, memorize the safety management cycle. So I'm going to make sure we've followed up on everything here, Tom. I think we have. There was one here that just said DOT audit tips around accuracy.
Okay, the biggest thing with the DOT audit, they called me now. They said, I'm coming this week, or pardon me, I'm coming in 2 weeks. The reason they give you advance notice is there's a rule that says if you have records off-site because you have different operations, maintenance is somewhere separate, you have DQ files where drivers are based instead at your principal place. They call you 2 weeks to a month ahead of time so that you have a chance to get all that stuff back to your facility. so that when they come to do the audit, it's all there, ready to go. If they knock on your door and say, hi, I'm here, any records you don't have there, you have 48 hours to get them there. They don't like doing that. They'd rather have everything there ready, so they'll give you a couple weeks to a month notice. So of course, you're just going to gather those files and never look at them, right? When you gather them up to get ready for the audit, one of the things you want to do is go through and do your own mini audit. Hire somebody from outside. I will give you a big nickel's worth of advice there. Because what's the odds you're blind to something? Because this is the way we always did it. So don't change anything, don't fix anything, but at least now you're prepared. You know what the audit's going to look like and you know what to expect. Your records are lined up and ready to go. That's the accuracy, because somebody comes in to do an outside audit, you don't want to give them a DQ file this thick. Let's go through and pull all this other stuff out. That's the kind of thing you can get narrowed down. This is exactly what they want. We have this all accident file. That's cool, that's great. Where's your accident register with just your DOT recordables listed on it? Well, we don't have that. Let's make one of those. You know, so that's the whole process thing and getting ready for that audit so you can present exactly what they're asking for and be ready for them. Even if some of the records aren't right, at least you'll have them, or you'll know the answer when they ask for it.
And just a quick comment on closing summary and key takeaways. If you can't read it from the back, but we really tried to focus on helping give you some ideas and tips and tricks around driver qualification file management. Talk about the importance of drug and alcohol testing. Make sure you have a program in place. How can we help drivers in your organization avoid being the cause of an accident? Training requirements. We know that there's training that's required through all of the regulations according to the DOT. Preparation and audits for the 6 factors of a DOT audit. If you don't feel comfortable and don't know what they are, please lean on us. We'll help you figure that out and understand it a little bit better. And then effective training will help you be more compliant, reduce your risk, and provide a path forward. And ultimately, how do you create that culture of safety, right? We want safety to be more than just an objective that you're working towards. We want it to really be embedded in your culture as an organization. And last but not least, as you can see against the wall over here, we've got a slew of J.J. Keller folks that are willing to help you. So without further ado, I would like to really have us put a warm Green Bay applause together for Mr. Tom Bray and the
Thank you for watching part 2 of our J.J. Keller DOT on-demand virtual live event series. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, don't forget to register now by clicking on the upcoming events located on your attendee console, and we will send you a link to the recording. Throughout today's event, we've mentioned many ways J.J. Keller can help your organization. In summary, we want to let you know that we serve all industries, including DOT, OSHA, construction, utility, and more. And we are here to help you with all aspects of compliance in your organization. If you would like to learn more about how J.J. Keller can help your organization, please make a selection on the poll box on your screen, and we'll be sure to touch base with you after the event. And as a thank you for attending today, folks, please don't forget to download today's free white papers from the resources box found on your attendee console. J.J. Keller's DOT Audit Assessment Workbook on assessing your risk within the 7 basics is an excellent checklist for avoiding DOT audits. So please use the poll and let us know how we can help. And also don't forget to download today's presentation handout from the resources box as well. Thank you everyone for attending part 2 of today's DOT on-demand virtual live event series featuring Tom Bray. If you submitted any questions throughout today's event, you can expect a follow-up from one of our compliance specialists in the coming days. Also, please let us know what you thought of the event today by filling out the post-event survey that I'm going to be popping up on your screen in just a moment. We would welcome your feedback. Thanks for attending and have a safe day.